And now we're going to hear more about the principles for responsible banking.
I truly believe that the next 30 years of our economy, of our society, can't be like the last 30 years.
How many crises do we need before we start reacting?
Sustainability means survival in the long run for every institution.
I don't see a world doing business or a bank doing business in the future without considering the importance of sustainability.
The answer is very straightforward and simple. You can't change anything unless you change yourself.
You have to share the same values and strategies to be able to do the business that you're doing.
If we want to achieve society's goals, we need to think beyond traditional banking.
This movement is showing the world that you can be a good entity that's supporting good communities and still be financially sustainable.
There's actually real power in working with each other to support each other, to drive change together.
What we have done is to identify 7 impact areas.
We are building a civil society advisory body.
Entonces, en el segmento de microfinanzas desarrollamos un pool de indicadores sociales.
We're looking at projects that will deliver quite major land use change to provide climate change resilience through improved flood defences.
The experiences we gained from the Australian National Outlook project in stakeholder engagement, I think, will stay with us for a very long time.
When so many people actually come together and say, this is the way we need to cooperate to do good, then we realize that the change is really possible.
It's not to damage business, it's to make business better.
More and more banks are getting this and are understanding that their long-term success is indeed understanding that society's success goes along with it.
When every bank employee and every bank around the world understands how their decisions affect society, affect the environment, and makes their decisions accordingly, does their work accordingly, interacts with clients accordingly, that's the moment when we've succeeded.
Great, welcome back. So you saw that wonderful video about the principles of responsible banking, closing with our chair for this session, Simone. Simone Detling is the banking lead for UNEP FI, and she manages initiatives related to the banking sector, including, but not limited to, the principles for responsible banking. So she has got a packed intro. Thank you very much for moderating this panel. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to the CEO panel today, marking the 1-year anniversary of the Principles for Responsible Banking. Exactly 1 year ago today, 130 bank CEOs from around the world, together with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, have launched the Principles for Responsible Banking. By signing these principles, banks commit to align their business strategy and practice with the Sustainable Development Goals and the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change. And with that, to scale up their contribution to these global goals that humanity has set itself for a sustainable future. Today, at this first anniversary of the principles, we want to hear from signatory bank CEOs from different parts of the world what they have done in the first 12 months to deliver on the commitments that they have made. We want to hear what change they have already achieved. We want to hear to what extent they have been able to, together with their clients, already achieve more positive contributions to their society's sustainable development goals. And we also want to look at, and I think that's quite important, where and why we still see transactions and decisions that seem to be not aligned with the commitments made. So for that, today I have with me a number of CEOs from different parts of the world. I have Christos Megalou, CEO of Piraeus Bank in Greece. From Sweden, I have Johan Turgeby, CEO of SEB. Center Invest in Russia is today represented by their CEO, Lydia Simonova. And last but not least, we do have from Mexico at 3 a.m. local time, and thanks for that outstanding commitment, Carlos Hank Gonzalez, the chairman of Banorte. And of course, I have with me all of you in the esteemed audience joining us from around the world. So please do make sure to enrich this discussions with your perspectives and with your questions. Christos, by now the coalition behind the principles has grown to over 190 banks, jointly representing about 40% of the global banking sector, serving over 1.6 billion customers worldwide. But when we started out, it was only 30 banks, and Piraeus was one of those 30 that initially led the development of the principles. So you were a man of the first hour, and let me start with you here. To quote one of your staff, if you want to change the world, you first have to change yourself. So what has changed at Piraeus Bank over the last 12 months?
Good morning, Simone. Good morning, everybody. Great honor to be in this panel. And it's amazing that there has been one exact year that we signed the Principles of Responsible Banking in New York. And we got into the journey of essentially implementing change. And what was important for us as an organization, and the principles helped us a lot and led us to establish, is a governance system for the principles of responsible banking. From the very beginning, we wanted to make the principles a commitment for all employees, top down. And we introduced a participatory approach, which was top-down and bottom-up, to develop strategies and targets for the principles of responsible banking. We have created a corporate responsibility committee. We have appointed senior management of the EXCO as responsible banking advisors, and we are disseminating in the whole organization the fact that we want to be adhering to the principles of responsible banking. I personally inform the EXCO and the board on progress, and through that participatory system where cross-function participation is a must, we are making the organization aware of all the things that we would like to achieve. A few days ago, we formulated an action framework with specific actions and products, and this will be translated to specific and measurable targets by early 2021. And finally, we have produced an ESG strategy based on 4 pillars: building a common understanding and culture of what it means to be a sustainable and responsible banker, setting and monitoring performance against ESG indicators that are clear to everybody, focusing on innovation and creating products, and disclosing how we manage our own carbon footprint for our operation and our financing. A lot of things that have happened the last year, and we are very proud of it.
Fantastic. Christos, that sounds like quite a bit has happened within your bank. You speak of having developed targets and actions, which of course is one of the key steps in delivering on your commitments under the principles for responsible banking. I assume your targets will be disclosed only in a few weeks, but maybe you can give us already an idea in which areas we can expect to see targets from Piraeus? Where are really the areas, the issues that Piraeus has a strong impact on and is planning to really make a change in Greece?
Well, it is on the ESG agenda, environment, society, and governance. We are focusing on the environment to be able to measure our carbon footprint and the carbon footprint that we create when we are financing our clients. And we would like to be able to adhere to the long-term goal of the Paris Climate Agreement. On society, we are focusing on initiatives, especially Greece, who has been part of a long 10-year crisis and coming out of recession in helping the younger generation, particularly, and limiting the brain drain. And we are focusing on products, sustainability-linked loans that they will be able to be directed to our clients, and this will be measurable against targets on a quarterly basis.
Okay, fantastic. Christos, one more follow-up question. I mean, you spoke a lot about bringing together people internally from across departments, and maybe you can speak to some first results of that. How has the way of doing things, how has collaboration between different departments within Piraeus changed with the measures you've taken in these first 12 months?
I was very pleased to see senior members of the management team, the head of corporate and investment banking, the head of retail, the head of Piraeus Financial Products, focusing and actually spending a lot of time with their colleagues and myself, but also senior members of their team, in coming together and creating a common language, a common understanding, common targets, and making sure that this action plan is going to be implemented going forward. The tone has to come from the top, and then it has to disseminate down. And this is what we are doing. I was very happy to see real progress, products, innovation on sustainability products coming out of these meetings, and a pledge throughout the organization that we will continue along this path. Extremely encouraging results for the bank.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Christos, and congratulations on really creating the right structures and culture and motivation within Piraeus. Christos spoke, one thing he spoke about was understanding the climate impact of the clients that are being financed. And Johan, let me come to you there in Sweden. In general, understanding the impacts of what you're financing, of the clients, the projects, the customers you're providing financial services to, is a key basic step in delivering on the principles. And I understand SEB has done quite a bit of work in the first 12 months on understanding, assessing, analyzing its impacts, both broadly on sustainability and on climate. It would be great to get some more details from you there on what you've done.
Thank you, Simone. Nice to see you, and good morning from me too. And I just must say, very well done, Christos. I would echo everything you said. It was very inspiring. When it comes to the indirect impact, which I think is the most tricky one and maybe most important, as a bank in itself has a quite limited use of resources as a professional services industry, it is something that is very high up on the agenda. In our bank, we've been part in the expert group for the taxonomy, so we've had people on the industry happy that we have been fortunate enough to guide and have input when it comes to the framework for sustainable financing, how to define what's green, what's transition, what's blue, what's red, which is something our product development teams constantly are working on. I mean, green bonds have been around now for 11 or 12 years, but this is now quickly being developed in other areas. When it comes to the loan book, we have gone about the work as such. We've included the whole balance sheet in 28 different categories. And then we've stipulated a list of what is required for each industry or sub-industry. And here the taxonomy and TCFD has been very important guiding principles for us. But one needs to put down the foot and say, this is important to us. This is how we see it. Those are, I would divide them into three camps. One is, of course, first to just, for the whole organization, we're 15,000 people, roughly $300 billion of balance sheet commitment. It's to be very clear and concise in the governance and in the categorization on what's what. That is very easy to put on paper. It's very hard to execute. Once that's done, you need to transparently report it. And when that's done, you need to make some actions and make some decisions on where do you want to commit your shareholders' capital and your finite resources in order to be aligned with your desired state in the future. Call it Paris aligned. So we are done with classifying the 28 or so industry sectors. And we've now, it's like everything else, it's an 80-20 rule. So 20% of those industries are having, in our assessment, 80% of a negative impact. And we've gone through 3 or 4 of those in detail, where we actually devised an internal plan on whom to bank, how to commit the capital, and how we should view transition. We probably will get back to this, but there is a clear distinction between new business and new clients and existing. And we can talk about that later, because one of the largest dilemmas is, of course, where you have promised and had a long historical relationship, what do you do now? But it's quite easy on new business. You can quickly limit your exposure and say that this bank will no longer commit any resources to more of that type of business. Out of those we've done, we changed the corporate policies, both when it comes to risk and, I mean, we call it credit risk, but it's really all risks to be included in everything that we do. And very similar to what Christos said, we've created something, let's call it inspired by credit risk. Credit risk is one of the most common things for bankers to relate to, and we have very well established long-term governance models for it. And we reorganized the banks to add something we called Group Sustainability Executive Committee, which is a subset which I chair myself, just to bring up sustainability on the same level as one of the most classic areas one considers in banking, namely credit. And in here, we do all this work. Last point I'll make is this includes product development. So we do our green bonds, red bonds, blue bonds, and all the sustainable linked loans. Retail products are now coming in fast pace, green mortgages, green bank accounts, and we're working on also green equity for the future. We have all these groups. It's very fragmented before we did the reorganization, working with regulators, bank associations, PRI, PRB in the UN, but also with activist organization, non-profit organization, and we put all these things together, including the reporting areas. So we're making progress. I'm happy about your positive connotation to introduce me, but we are certainly not done, and quite humble for the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Johan, for those insights. A bit of a follow-up question from my side. I mean, you talk about, I find this quite interesting, how credit and credit risk is a concept that, you know, your bankers are very familiar with. And I think that's a lot about this idea of what effect do developments on the world have on my portfolio. Now, the Principles for Responsible Banking introduced this view of impact, which is more about what impact do what I finance have on the world, right? We're getting from this inside to out view. And I understand from what you just said that you're trying to elevate this view and thinking to have an equal place to the risk thinking. If I understand that correctly, that's quite a task in terms of changing culture. How exactly are you approaching that, and what challenges are you encountering there?
Yeah, no, you understood it correctly. We want to elevate it, but I'm coming from a position which is not based on the narrative of polarization. Some people would like to argue that non-quantifiable risks, sustainability risks, is something different, and I would argue they are exactly the same. We have much more risks that we are familiar with than credit. We have operational risks, liquidity risks, reputational risks, regulatory compliance risks. And I just think this is one area that needs to be of things to consider. I would also say that in practical terms, one of the largest risks we actually are discussing on a daily basis is stranded assets. Is this company or this project future-proof? And all of a sudden, it becomes 100% aligned with the economic risks that we are so accustomed to. So if you do not include sustainability risks, or is this asset future-proof beyond 3 to 5 years for the coming 30, you are risking pricing it incorrectly, and you're risking having an asset value or a discounted cash flow analysis, which is not accurate. And in my book, that is exactly what we are doing, but there are no kind of established models for it. We are learning by doing and trying to evolve. When it comes to culture, it's always the trickiest thing. The easy answer is just the sum of the people. So sometimes you need to ask around and see what people do have a genuine interest to drive this forward. Not to appoint someone you think would be accurate, but you need to go where the energy is. And if energy is there, things happen. You also need to consider hiring a lot of new staff. So my first reflection was that asking a very large group of professional credit analysts to just incorporate sustainability in their analysis. We tried, and it's not credible. A very difficult thing to understand. You need to respect the experience someone who has worked with those issues possess, and use it. So we've added, a new analytical team called sustainability risk by sector, because they differ very, very, very much in between as well. So organizational change we can all fix. In the end, it's going to be the people. And right now, we have 15,000 employees, and I would say 1,000 people plus passionately burning for this, including clients and regulators and other interests and shareholders. So there is no lack of interest. You don't need to preach or be like an evangelist today on this topic in this part of the world. That's over. Now it's about execution. We can go from PowerPoint to getting it done.
Wonderful. Johan, I think I like this a lot, and it's something that I think a lot of leaders would agree with. You need to go where the energy is. You need to respect people's experiences and bring them on board, making use of that. I think that's quite a good conclusion and takeaway already from this first part. I think one way also to drive change internally is to commit and signal to the outside world in how you refinance and commit yourself to tag internally, to track and to report on how what you're financing really delivers on those external commitments. And Lydia, let's go to Center Invest in Russia there. Center Invest was the first Russian bank to launch a green bond at the Russian stock exchange. How has that helped you drive change internally?
Good morning, Simone. Good morning to everyone. I'm also very happy to be there and to know about the experience and the progress of our partners, and I will be happy to share our personal experience and all of the progress we made during the last 12 months. So our bank's mission is built on environmental and social values that determine our responsible attitude to our customers, partners, investors, and shareholders, and of course to whole society. And for me personally, I didn't doubt doubt for a minute when we decided to join the UNEP 5 Principles for Responsible Banking and to become a signatory in November last year. So there have been many important events in our bank activity, but I'd like to focus on the most significant one precisely because it has become outstanding not only personally for our bank, but the whole financial community, Russian financial community. As you absolutely correctly said, our bank was the first Russian bank who placed the green bonds in the sustainable development sector of Moscow exchange. I perfectly understand that green bonds are already quite widespread in the United States and Europe, worldwide, but for Russia, it was a really notable achievement. And with this notable achievement, our bank's team proved and showed once again how good trends are set. And our green bonds helped us to strengthen our reputation not only on domestic but on the international markets as well. And for me personally, it was a very exciting experience because I was responsible for this project, and it was related to many changes in the management system of our bank and adoption of a number of internal documents. And for me personally, it helped me better understand what I can improve as the executive manager of the bank, what disadvantages we have, what we can do in the future with these projects. And for example, our environmental and social policy was adopted in 2008, but meanwhile we have to make some amendments and for example to implement a green bond framework and to take obligations to invest money in strict control of the targeted use of the funds. Also, we have amended our environmental and social report and expanded it to the special section devoted to the targeted funds of the green bond placement. And of course, frankly speaking, 20 years work was really expiring and inspiring for us, but I'd like to point out that signing these principles and joining the working group leading by you, Simona, and your colleagues personally gave us a very powerful boost in development. And we perfectly understand right now that we are not the only one. We are part of deep thinking and financial conscious community, and inspiring the working on your working groups. And right now it's a pleasure to announce that our bank right now headed a project groups on sustainable development in Association of Russian Banks. So it's our personal achievement, and we do hope that I feel very confident that we are moving in the right direction, and we will share our experience and good values in sustainable banking, not only in worldwide, but in Russia especially.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And also for you, a follow-up question, Lydia. I mean, Johan spoke about, going where the energy is and building on the motivation of people internally. From your experience, this green bond, also signing up to the principles for responsible banking, what does this mean for your employees in their day-to-day work?
So I think our great achievement right now that using these projects and implementing the new projects helped us to change the mentality of our employees. And I'm very proud that right now we change our scoring, our loan progress systems. And right now every loan officers in the bank could easily calculate the CO2 reduction, could assess the energy efficiency side of the project. And it's was our so this requires management of constant change, and amid continual crisis and creative social responsible solutions in the interest of the next and future generations. And I think we did and will do our best just to change the mentality, not just only for our employees, but the whole society, and to interact with the general population we work with, and to create a pool of professional investors also.
Fantastic. Lydia, no small goal, change the mentality of the banking sector and also the expectations towards the banking sector of different stakeholders. I think very well in line with what the principles are trying to achieve. I mean, we've heard about people, we've heard about assessing impacts. Carlos, I hope by now you had time to have a few cups of coffee. Once again, thank you very much for getting up at 3 a.m. to join us. It is very much appreciated. One key aspect of the Principles for Responsible Banking is really to make sure that all core business areas are looked at, that their impact is understood, and that they contribute to society's goals for a sustainable future. And I understand that Banorte expanding existing policies and practices to key business areas that haven't been part of this before has been one of the main things you've done over the last 12 months.
Sure. Thank you very much, Simon. First of all, it is an honor to share this panel and be a part of this forum, share this panel with Lydia, with Christos and Johan. And as you mentioned, we agreed that first of all, if we want to change the world, we need to change ourselves. And that is specifically why we decided to join this core group of founders and become the first Mexican bank to foster these principles. And as part of this philosophy of, first of all, putting our own house in order, we've also become a pioneer in Mexico in implementing a social environmental risk management system that allows us evaluating the risks and the possible impacts that our financing can have in the environment and in all our communities. One of the key achievements that we had this year was specifically that expansion of that social and environmental risk management system to different areas of the bank, as you were mentioning. We expanded it to the infrastructure and government areas, which are some of the largest areas that we have in our lending portfolio. For example, the infrastructure banking unit is one of the most impactful and largest areas of the bank that we have integrated already in our social and environmental risk management system, which comes along with due diligences. We go and do on-site visits, for example, to the projects, and we engage directly with all of our clients. We started to measure these impacts of our portfolio and its alignment to sustainable and sustainable goals in 2019. And this is our response to a robust training of hundreds of people with hundreds of hours with a credit and risk executive in what we are now calling non-financial risks. But also, of course, to the principles framework, which has helped us align all these topics. For example, one of the most important things that we have achieved so far is in our National Credit Committee, it includes the environmental and social risk management team in 100% of its meetings. It gives opinions, introduces checklists to be complied with within its total compliancy of the credit applications in corporate, government, and infrastructure bankings, for example. And for example, now in Banorte, we are working hand in hand with our authorities in Mexico and all of our peers in the financial system to promote and adopt these financial principles. The substantial human and economic impact, for example, that we've had, and we've all had it in the COVID-19 pandemic, has not stopped us to implement this PRB. We are even now more optimistic about this, starting with the fact that, for example, stopping economic activity at once, it has showed that humans have an impact on the environment, not only on climate change, but also on the employees and the customers' behavior. And the world is now starting to recover, and I really want to emphasize that the financial system is key to the leverage of sustainable and recovery. The transformation is now a reality, and changes are felt across all our business in Banorte. This is, of course, like for all of us, a new era and a new way of doing banking with a purpose, with a commitment to impact positively and mitigate negative impacts in every product and service that we offer in Banorte.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I think it's very interesting to hear how you structurally changed, and it's quite encouraging to hear that the environmental and social experts are there in every credit committee meeting. Now, expanding policies like that to new areas in the bank can be greeted with enthusiasm or resistance. Johan spoke about the previous experience of people. Often it's felt that it's a hindrance to business rather than a help. What was the experience at Banorte? How did you manage to get people in those business areas on board with those changes?
Well, it's true. What very true and very real. But I think, and personally speaking, for example, once you understand the capability and the responsibility that you have in order to change the world in this way, and how we can do it from our business, it motivates us personally and motivates every single part of our institution when we understand what we can do. And for example, we have not only begun to implement the PBR in our banking business, but also on all lines of business in our financial group, including, for example, the insurance company, with an ambition and engagement with all our stakeholders. Thanks to this approach, for example, we have already launched in June of this year, through our group subsidiary of Seguros Banorte, a protection against climate risks and natural disasters for the Quintana Roo coasts, which includes the Mesoamerican Reef and the Mayan Riviera, which a lot of you, I'm sure, have heard about, which is one of the most famous beach resorts and key to the Mexican tourist sector that contributes with about 10% of the GDP in our country. In alliance with a very important government banking client of Banorte, which is the Mexican state of Quintana Roo, it is constituted as the Mexican Reef Protection Program, where we have already structured a parametric solution which pays out to support the rapid restoration and the key of a section of the Mesoamerican Reef by the state of Quintana Roo on the Yucatan Peninsula, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. And by engaging with a number of private and public and international stakeholders, the Mexican Reef Protection Program is one of the first examples of a nature-based solution on a coral reef. It enhances and protects an environmental asset by providing the funds for rapid restoration, for example, which is also mitigating the impact to the local economy.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carlos. And I do think with this, you're getting us a bit to the second thing we really want to look at here in this panel. We've talked a lot now about creating internal change, which is a prerequisite for creating change together with clients in the real economy. But at the end of the day, the principles for responsible banking are about changing each bank's impact in the real economy, about being able to make a tangible contribution to key challenges, environmental and social, in your local society. And Carlos, you already started speaking a little bit about this. Mexico is the 5th most biodiverse country in the world. And last year at the launch of the principles, I think I asked you, I think it was a time when we saw around the world pictures of a burning Amazon. And I think I asked you, what are banks in Latin America doing to help safeguard these ecosystems? And you are speaking about coral reef protection. You are also quite involved in the Mexican tourism sector, which is quite important to local ecosystems, and also touches upon quite strongly indigenous community, of which Mexico has a very rich heritage. So it would be great to understand from you what you identify as, the most important challenges Mexico is facing, and what connections you see between your bank's business and those challenges, and what opportunities you really see for a bank like Banorte to help your society tackle those.
Sure. Well, banks are fully committed with the principles. I have no doubt about that, and I'm making sure that happens in our bank in Banorte, and not only in the bank, as I mentioned earlier, throughout our whole line of businesses in Grupo Financiero Banorte. And in this context, as many of us here have already mentioned, we're facing the challenge of implementing this fully. Being completely honest, we're still engaged in projects that are still not complying with the principles that could be, and that way it could be even a little questionable in the light of the PRB. But nevertheless, let me tell you what we are doing right now. We are definitely more aware now, not only about the damages of providing financing to these types of projects and the benefits for the world, and specifically even more directly to our financial institution, of either avoiding them or advising them to improve or even change the projects. And we do acknowledge that knowing the guiding principles and having committed to them is helping us very much to do that. So having said all this, what we are now doing is avoiding incoming questionable projects in the light of the PRB, or advising them when it is possible to us to change these types of projects to minimize or eradicate the negative impacts. We are trying very hard to choose when it's possible for us to finance the parts of the legacy projects that are less questionable. And we are heavily and very actively involved with the authorities, regulators, and the Bankers Association, for example, to encourage financial institutions to continue to adopt the best practices and clearly the PRB. At the end, this is very similar to trying to reach, for example, a zero carbon emissions goals, which one cannot do. We cannot do it from one day to another, but committing to a date or a timeline or certain milestones, for example, and knowing what and how to do with this kind of principles are definitely a path that we all have to follow to have a better world. In this context, for example, the speed of convergence is key in order to reap the benefits for institutions and for the world, of course. We have a very unique and important opportunity right now, and recovery starts to look very possible, and the financial sector will definitely play a major part in it. However, this is not something that we can recover and just go back to business as usual. Sustainability has to be an integral part of this recovery.
So, thank you very much, Carlos, and thank you for your honesty there. I think it is a quite important point that the moment banks sign up to the principles, they already have a loan book and clients and projects they have committed to, and there is a certain legacy, and that can't change from one day to another. But what the principles really help you with is to establish targets and set milestones and a plan to change that portfolio over time and to work with your clients. I think that is important to point out. And speaking of clients and customers, I mean, at the end of the day, it is through clients and customers that banks really have a strong impact, and it is with them that banks can change impact in the real economy. And so it's quite important to involve them and bring them along. And Lydia, let's go to Russia here. That has been one of the focus areas for Center Invest since signing up to the principles to really bring their retail customers along in this journey and make them a strong part of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Simon. So we are a regional bank. We're located in southern Russia, and regional bank works with the risk of the regional economy. And for example, when you lend any money, you have always remember that on the other side of your balance sheet is the household deposit and company's funds. And this means your neighbors, and the money belongs to the companies where his family works. So we are the bank with the focus on the general population, and we feel in absolutely our responsibility to interact this population. And as I said previously, inspiring after the successful placement of green bonds, we decided to move forward. And this was our green deposit scheme was launched. So the green deposit account conforms to all responsible principles, and every depositors receive when you open this account, you receive a sustainable investor badge. I will show you this one, and moreover, the certificate of responsible investors looks like this. So you may see that the green deposit is issued for a period of 17 months, and which corresponds to 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And our bank will annually provide a report that all funds which under the contribution are directed to the finance and implementation of Sustainable Development Goals and to financing regional economy. So we can endlessly speaking about the figures and what we do, but I'd like to show our case. So for every 100 rubles of deposited with the bank, you may see that 74 rubles goes towards in the Sustainable Development Goals. So this clearly shows how our bank depositor contributes into the sustainable development of the region they live. So the first report will be disclosed next year, but this year, in frame of our environmental and social report, we have already disclosed the targeted use of the green bond placement, and with the hope that all of our products and all of our services will provide to general populations and which protect the natural resources, improve on financial literacy, and others. But I'd like also to mention that for us, non-financial statement which relates to some kind of ESG values and sustainable values, it's not some kind of an open mind as a first impression or something like this. And for us, it's very important that many years ago we introduced some kind of the coefficients. And one of the interest one is the number of children born from our employers. And when I see that this number of born children is growing, I understand that our staff is absolutely confident with the future, and me personally as an employer moving in the right direction and gave them the good future, I think. So that's why these coefficients is we are used to disclose to our investors, and they're absolutely happy that we think about not only for the general society but the whole staff as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Lydia. I think this is a fantastic example to bring along your customers. One very quick follow-up question, and please a quick answer. What percentage of the overall deposits you receive fall under this sustainable deposit scheme?
If we speak about this scheme, so about 20% right now, but we will do our best to increase this figure, of course, and it's one of our core targets on the next year.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I do have a question from the audience, and at this point an encouragement to the audience. Please do send your questions in. We monitor them live. It's a quick follow-up question for Carlos on the coral reef project, which people find quite interesting. And the question is, what is your motivation for doing that? Is it carbon offsetting? Is it demonstrating a commitment to sustainable outcomes? Maybe you can talk real quick about the motivations and the ultimate goals you have with this coral reef insurance project.
Sure. As I mentioned, I think once you understand the impact as a bank that you can have on the world, on your country, and in your society, then that is what really motivates us. For example, it motivates myself, it motivates the people that we work with, and it motivates the whole institution in trying to do what we can in order to help the world, to help our country, and to help our society. For example, as I mentioned, the coral reef in Mexico. Mexico is very rich in biodiversity, as we were talking about, and that coral reef has been a very important part of Mexico, and it is very important that we keep it that way. We keep it that way for future generations. We keep it that way for our country, for Mexico, and we keep it that way for the world. And once you understand that for yourself or the institution, you have something that can help achieve that for future generations, for our kids, for our grandkids, and for the world to be to maintain that level of sustainability. It's something that you do very passionately. It's something that you take very in a very responsible way, and you are happy to be able to contribute in that way. Of course, we are not the only factor that will be in place in order to keep that coral reef and maintain it for the future and for our world, but we feel very honored and proud to be able to do so.
Thank you very much, Carlos. And I do think we've heard about, your collaboration with clients. We've heard about Lydia's collaboration with retail customers. And this has been a year where both corporate clients and retail customers relied very strongly on their banks to help them through one of the most significant crises of our time, through the global COVID pandemic. Johan, maybe to go to Sweden, those corporate clients, those retail customers, I'm sure they relied very strongly on SEB as well. What has SEB really been doing this year to support their clients, their customers, but also broader society through the COVID-19 crisis? And what are you planning to do also as a green bonds pioneer to ensure that our recovery out of that is going to be a sustainable one?
Yeah, thank you. That's a broad question. I'll try to frame it, and you just signal if I'm getting too long-winded. First, I think the immediate impact is an expected one, and we saw almost a 10 or even above 10% increase in corporate loan exposure. We are predominantly a corporate and investment bank in this part of the world, and the professional treasuries of our dear acted very forcefully, more or less from an insurance policy standpoint, to secure some liquidity very early on in March and April. And it was a big debate here. Will the banks be able to take the responsibility to finance the economy given the dimmer outlook on credit losses? We can now see, after we've seen the second quarter come in, that most, if not all, banks did expand their balance sheet, and it seems to have been working very well in collaboration with governments in order to secure the funds for companies, coupled with a lot of government and central bank support, etc. That was the first. Now this discussion has been normalized, and we are now talking about reopening the production plants instead. And again, the banks needs to be there because it has a working capital effect, and it's just common banking business under very distressed or unusual circumstances. On the private side, it was predominantly to protect the disposable income for any household that got hurt. You might know, or you might not, Sweden was an outlier in terms of not shutting down the real economy as forcefully as many other countries. So we did have a little bit of a less pressure, but still there is a lot of corporate support right now for employment. It's help with paying VAT later. And for the banking system, it was mostly about amortization holidays. So we have a legally stipulated amortization, and in order to protect that cash in the disposable income of households, we allowed everyone, together with the government, to just apply to get that waived, and that would be no problem. Interestingly enough, out of 2 million retail clients, only 24,000 or so applied for it. But that has been stable now, and we sit in a very different environment. Lastly, I just talked a little bit about sustainable product innovation, because we've seen two mega trends accentuated in this crisis. It's the digitization of financial services, and it's the sustainability work. So the green bond framework is, of course, continuing to develop, but it is a $200-300 billion market industry per year these days. We have just done our first red bonds before this, and red, we need vaccine, immunization, or health. And what we are talking about is just the simple notion of use of proceeds. So I've been a corporate banker for a bit more than two decades. And in the old days, use of proceeds was documented by one paragraph in the loan documentation. And it always said general corporate purposes. That means giving you no guidance as an investor or a bank on what the company actually will use the money for. And today I see this future where use of proceeds will be a key determinant in the financial product. So it could be, for this money, I want to develop clean air. So help with health and immunization and vaccine has exploded. So we've done bond deals now for the World Bank, for IFC, for IFIN, for Nordic Investment Bank, and they've all been directly related to corona and immunization, vaccine creation. We've also done it for corporates. So we had one very interesting company in Sweden called Getinge, and they create the ventilators for the emergency hospitals, and they needed some capital quickly in order to increase the production capacity. So those things are here to stay. And then we've done, of course, the next wave of blue, which is taking everything we've learned about green and deploying it on clean water instead of clean air. Inspired by the same framework, it's of equal importance to many, and also getting very inspired as a hobby diver about the reef project in Mexico. I wish I could support it. I'm afraid we have no more any reefs in this part of the world. But blue bonds are really the future that is very exciting if we could get the same kind of institutional investor base mobilized around investing in those. And we've done one, so little to brag about, Nordic Investment Bank. I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Johan, I think it's very exciting to hear how you're using capital markets and your own experience as a green bonds pioneer to tap capital markets for the COVID-19 response, of course, also Blue Project. Let's stay with this idea of capital markets as really an area you can use responsibly for a moment, because we have a follow-up question here from the audience. And it relates a little bit maybe to some things Carlos touched upon earlier, the tricky questions. Over these 12 months, the first 12 months of the principles, we've seen banks doing great things, but we also seen banks involved in transactions that seem questionable with regards to the principles. I mean, we have the current Lamu coal-fired power plant in Kenya, but we've also seen issues like, for example, the IPO, the initial public offering of Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil producer. And from your perspective, what's the explanation? Why do we see principles for responsible banking signatories in such transactions still?
Is it guided to me? I think I'd rather answer the question generally because I have a very little insight in those two or what banks were in those. But I'll tell you how we are thinking about it. This is a dilemma. So as I said before, it's easier when you think about fresh money into new clients, and you can stop it quite easily. And we have done so and gone quite far in certain industries and certain exposure. With existing client relationships and existing exposure, you have a separate responsibility, and that's to also be sustainable in your client relationship and live up to what you've promised and not disrupt something in a way. Here, I think every institution and individual needs to first decide if you want to engage and be part of a solution of improving, or you want to be active by disengaging. And I don't think there's a one right or wrong, and I think we all will do both. In SEB, we will do both, completely disengaging in certain industries and area, and most of the existing client relationship, including oil and gas and shipping, we will not be excluding those relationships, but be inclusive. And we would like to work with them. This is the very sensitive area of transition. It's certainly not green. It's certainly not doing any good from many of the aspects we're discussing here, but they have an important role to play because the world looks like it does. We still need asphalt for the infrastructure project. We still need to consume food. We need clean water. We need electricity. And here we can work as a very important catalyst to speed it up. In the end, we will, of course, tighten these regulations. We will have capital coming into the picture in the future. I think laws will be changed, and there will be much more clarity. So in my book, I think there is a big dilemma. We would like to engage with a lot of companies that could not today say they do any good, but we want to still be a positive force in the right direction.
Okay, thank you very much, Johan. So engagement for transition in the real economy over walking away too early from your perspective. In that vein, Christos, coming back to Greece, your bank is one of the signatories of the collective commitment to climate action, which at this point is really the most ambitious global commitment for banks out there to aligning their portfolio and business with the goals of the Paris Agreement. When we, hear about these dilemmas and how tricky it is and how difficult the transition can sometimes be, what are your plans with regards to your commitments under this climate pledge? Carlos, I'm not sure if we lost your audio.
Unmute.
Oh, sorry. I keep
I'm
saying
here. Yeah.
I mean Christos. Apologies, Christos.
Yes, I'm here. So we are in Greece. We are the predominant bank financing the agri-food sector, and as you can imagine, climate change has an impact, direct impact to our clients. Financial risks, from climate change could transform into credit risk. We are very sensitive, and as a result, we were one of the first 38 banks to sign the collective commitment to client action, which help us discover how to set targets for climate. Is not very easy, and it's quite new for us, but we have made internal progress, and we have recently submitted our commitment to the science-based targets to reduce our carbon emissions to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. These all are very important tasks for us, and we are committing ourselves to those client science-based targets that we have been talking about.
Yeah. Carlos, thank you very much for that. We are pretty much at the end of our time. So it is, of course, only a snapshot that we can give in this very short panel. I think we've heard quite concretely about the work that has been done in mobilizing people internally, in establishing the right structures, in making sure that there is a good understanding of how the banking portfolio relates to external impacts. I think we've heard some very strong examples for how banks are working with their clients, with their stakeholders, to come up with new solutions, to bring their customers along in this journey, make them part of it, and to use capital markets and all the instruments that are there towards contributing to sustainability goals. But it is a very small snapshot, and there are about 185 banks more in the principles. So I do encourage all of those in the audience and beyond to go have a look at our website, where we are providing a one-year update on the progress that has been made around the world with regards to implementing the principles and creating change in the real economy. It's really quite exciting to see. With that, I would like to thank my four panelists. And Carlos, once again, thank you very much
for getting up this early. We are excited about the progress that we have seen in the first 12 months. I think as we've also addressed, not everything we've seen is in line with what we want to see, but there has to be some work left for the next 12 months. So we are very much looking forward to working with you, Johan, Carlos, Christos, and Lydia, and the other 190 banks. With that, thank you very much to the audience, and have a good day.
Great, thanks so much, Simone, and congratulations to you and to the panelists for a really engaging, really interesting session. Thank you for joining us and for sharing what you're doing on the PRB. So we've had a jam-packed morning session. I'm not going to try and summarise everything, but a couple of things came to mind. So we heard from Martin Spolk, who is Head of Sustainable Finance at the European Commission, DG for Financial Services, and he was a couple of things he outlined. The fact that COVID, amongst other things, has necessitated a revisiting of the EC Sustainable Finance Action Plan, and they're going to update that by the end of the year, which is very exciting. And we also talked about green bonds, and particularly with the EC Green Recovery Package, how 30% of that's going to be issued as green bonds, and the opportunity to use that issuance, that quite significant new issuance into the capital markets, as a way to experiment and test different types of green bond structure, for example, like sustainability-linked bonds, but also to extend to other shades of green and indeed to possibly blue bonds and other such things. We had a very interesting conversation about that, so do have a look at the video. It was all recorded, it's online. That panel that just ended on banks and principles of responsible banking, we heard about the role of the principles in really catalysing action from nearly 200 different banks around the world, and also reflected on some of the banking innovation that's going on in different parts of the world as well. Clearly, the PRB is a platform for mobilising ambition. It isn't the be-all and end-all. Clearly, institutions will have to do more than just sign up to the PRB. Institutional investors will have to do more than just signing up to the principles response, but it's still nonetheless a really important framework for raising ambition, ratcheting the quality of action. So a jam-packed morning, all of that is available to watch again online, and it just is for me now to remind you that the final part of this session is this afternoon. We'll be back at 2 p.m. UK time. We have a virtual panel discussion looking at non-climate environmental risks. And that's going to be moderated by Jessica Smith, who's the ecosystems lead at UNEP FI, and then some very prominent names, as you can see from the sustainable finance community, Mardin McBrien, who runs CDSB, and Saskia Beslik as well, who's known to many of you. So join that session this afternoon, and that's going to be followed by a closing address by Adri Heinsbrook, who is from NN Investment Partners, who you heard from in part one of this four-part series. And some other quick reminders: visit the virtual expo, that's still there. All that content from the last month is available, will continue to be available. Do use the break to connect with other participants. And don't forget that there is an opportunity to continue participating, listening to these forums, engaging with them. The North America leg kicks off on Thursday this week, and you can register online, and the details are there online. So looking forward to seeing you in a couple of hours. Thank you for joining.